which is considered a very, very good material for making bridges. This particular Rudravina is not like many other Rudravinas because it seems to have incorporated many of the elements of Sarasvati Vina into its construction. And one of the advantages of incorporating many of the elements of the Sarasvati Vina in with the Rudravina is since there are many more people who know how to play Sarasvati Vina, it's much easier to get someone to come and play this. Now we have other instruments. We have flutes, for instance. This is a typical example of a South Indian flute, which is known as Venu. Notice it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holes in it. The North Indian flutes, which are known as Bansuri, tend to have 6 or 7 holes. Now this is an instrument which is known as Kanjira. And this Kanjira is basically a tambourine with only a single jingle. And notice that it has a lizard skin. The lizard skin has been a characteristic of the Kanjira for, I guess, many centuries. This instrument, although of a folk origin, has been adopted by the classical musicians of the South and is considered very, very common. This particular one is a rather small one. They tend to be a little bit larger, but they come in different sizes and in different pitches. Now this is an instrument which is known as Shehnai. We've got 2 of them here. Now the Shehnai is a double-reeded instrument. Actually, officially it's a double-reeded instrument, but I don't know if we can get in close enough here. We see it's actually a quadruple reed instrument. We have 2 reeds on each side. So although it's officially a double-reed instrument, really it's a quadruple reed instrument. The Shehnai is considered a very important instrument for auspicious functions like weddings and things of that nature. In the North, almost no wedding is complete without a Shehnai player. And other instruments that one may be interested. This is a little folk instrument which is known as Kamakshi Vina. One would take a small coin and put under here and it would act as a bridge. We have this membrane here. This particular membrane appears to be peritoneum, which is taken from the inner linings of animals, and it has a bow. And then one would play it in this fashion. It would be played very much like a violin. As a matter of fact, you could think of it as being a simple folk or crude version of a violin. Again, this is called Kamakshi Vina. Kamakshi was incidentally I guess you could call her a demigoddess, who was known for her quite curvaceous figure. Hence, the name here reminds one of Kamakshi. So we have the indentation here, hence the name Kamakshi Vina. Incidentally, a violin is sometimes referred to as a Kamakshi Vina in India.
Ustedes están viendo el canal 17 de Houston Media Source. También les habla Ernesto León en este su proyecto televisivo Inquietud Latina.
There are a number of percussive instruments. For instance, this is a kind of instrument known as talam. They can also be known as manjiras. These particular ones are a little on the large side. They would be very appropriate for bhajans and that is religious songs in temples and songs of that nature. More commonly, they would be on the smaller side, like this. This would be a much more common size for manjira, also known as talam. They come in different sizes because the larger ones are lower pitches and the smaller ones have higher pitches. And you can get them in whatever pitch you want, whatever is appropriate for your purposes. So this is known as manjira. It's also known as talam. This is an instrument known as kartal. The origin of the word seems a little obscure, but apparently the kar comes from kat, which is a word for, in many languages, which means wood, and tal means to clap. So literally, it means wooden clapper. These would also be commonly used in folk music. They would be used in religious music in temples and things like that. Notice there is a small hole here for the thumb, a larger hole here for the fingers. So this would be a common way that it would be played. On the same line, or at least a similar line of percussion instruments, we have this instrument over here. Now this is known as a chimta. Now the chimta is actually a tong. In Indian language, a chimti is tweezer, and this would be a chimta, which is large. It's a tong. These are actually fire tongs. But they're fire tongs that, you'd use for moving coals around and wood around and things like that in the fire, but it has morphed into a musical instrument. This particular type of chimta is very commonly used in the Punjab region, which is the extreme northwest part of India. And it's very common among Sikh religious musicians and Punjabi folk musicians and similar type of things. So this is the this is the chimta, which has, as I said, evolved from fire tongs. Now, while we're on the topic of percussion, one of the oldest classes of percussion instruments in India is the mridang class. This is an example of a mridangam, which is a South Indian mridang. It's a hollowed out log. There are heads on both sides. Notice also there's an application on both sides. There is a somewhat permanent application Now the mridangam is a very, very popular instrument in South Indian classical music. This application here is, they're varying ingredients, but they tend to be based upon some type of metallic powder such as iron dust. They also tend to have soot in them, which makes them black. And the binding agent is variously white flour or rice flour. There's a temporary application on the left side, which would normally be a wet application of flour and water, but for convenience sake, I have simply put on a little sticky putty. Not nearly as rich of a sound, but much more convenient. So this is the mridangam, which is common in the south. Now in the north, a similar instrument would be known as the pakawaj, which is very similar, which in many ways, from looking at it, is very, very similar. But there are subtle differences in the construction. One other interesting percussion instrument of the north is the khol, which is also known as a mridang. And this is sometimes clay, sometimes wood, different materials are used. There is a head on one side, and there's another head on this side, and both heads would be played simultaneously. Now the khol, also known as the mridang, is an extremely popular instrument in the northeast part of India. It's found in Assam, Bengal, and Bangladesh, areas like this. So this is the khol. It's used very much in religious music, bhajans, folk music, music of this nature. Now probably the king of the Indian percussive instruments is the tabla. Now this is the tabla. It is actually a pair of drums. There's the right hand one and there's the left hand one. The right hand one is generally referred to as being the daya, because daya means right, and the left hand one is generally referred to as baya, because baya means left. Now the interesting thing about the tabla is that when one is learning how to play tabla, one thinks in terms of a series of syllables.